on today's episode of the Law of Tech podcast.
And as you know, there's been a call for us to innovate and to change not just what legal services we provide, but really how we provide them. And for me, I think that's the biggest shift, the focus on how we do things as legal professionals versus what we do.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Law of Tech podcast. For this episode, I am joined by Michelle De Stefano to talk a little bit more about the topic of reshaping legal professionals to meet a new demand for legal services. Now, Michelle's a professor at the University of Miami School of Law, an author, speaker, and independent consultant on innovation, technology, culture, and cross-practice, cross-border initiatives. Before entering the legal sector, Michelle worked in advertising and marketing, and now she brings that experience to her work with lawyers and legal teams. She's also the founder of Law Without Walls, or short LWOW, and also does some amazing work at the more recently established Digital Legal Exchange. Now, Michelle, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for taking the time to join me.
I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So first things first, based on your work, I'm interested to know from you, how have you seen the legal services ecosystem change over time?
Well, I've done a lot of interviews, hundreds of interviews of general counsel, lawyers, heads of innovation at law firms from around the world. And as you know, there's been a call for us to innovate and to change not just what legal services we provide, but really how we provide them. And for me, I think that's the biggest shift, the focus on how we do things as legal professionals versus what we do. I mean, 20 years ago, being a really great lawyer meant you were an expert. You were a great problem solver. And some of the other skills that professional service providers need to have, lawyers maybe didn't need to as much, communication and empathy and self-awareness. And I'm seeing a much bigger focus on that.
Now, you just mentioned innovation. That is one of the big topics and one of the concepts that really this whole shift is centering around at the moment. I know that you've done a lot of research on this topic of innovation, as you just said. Also, you've done hundreds of interviews. How should we understand this concept of innovation?
So lots of people think that what is being asked of us is innovation in the Clayton Christensen disruptive sense. And yet I don't think that's true. I think what's being asked is innovation in the sense of adaptive, incremental changes that add value, long-lasting value. And that innovation in that sense can move us miles, even though it seems like inches.
And to what extent do you believe we're already seeing that in the legal industry? Or do you believe that it has become somewhat more of a buzzword?
Well, definitely think that the word innovation is a buzzword and everyone's sick of it. And with respect to incremental changes that add value, yes, I've seen a lot in the last decade. I mean, in-house legal departments that didn't have any legal ops people working in them or any contract management systems or document management systems. Wow, has that changed? And even law firms, the way they use technology, the way they bill their clients, the different platforms that they're using, also lots of innovation in the last decade. That said, we have so much farther to go. And no, I still don't mean disruptive. I mean so much farther, even with what we've got. So take, for example, in Law Without Walls this past year, so many of our topics ended up being around knowledge sharing and knowledge management. And it wasn't that the in-house legal department or law firm wasn't trying to do it. It wasn't that they didn't have a system. It was that just because you build it doesn't mean people will come. I call it the Field of Dreams problem, if any of you are Kevin Costner fans. And it's, how do you motivate people to change the way they work, to use iManage if you've now bought it, and then to use it appropriately? How do you get them to tag it? Because remember, just because you ask for information, if the information isn't tagged appropriately, you can't go and search for it. How do you get law firm partners to share templates? to share information about past pitches or current work so that you can leverage it in future work. It seemed like almost every project started centering around the how and motivating people to use now those incremental, innovative technologies that legal departments and law firms and law companies, and believe me, some of the law companies are the ones that are creating it, like Elevate Services and United Lex. But how do you make sure they're used appropriately so then you can get even more change? Use the data to start making better decisions, not replace us, but as a extra arm for us.
Now, looking at this, why do you believe that there are still quite a number of legal professionals and law firms that are still behind in this development?
I think that I have this funny quote from a lawyer. I've been working with a firm on an innovation committee and 5 different projects to try to bring them to life. And one of the lawyers said, "It's just that we're so busy, we don't have time to be innovative and creative." And it's ironic and true. I mean, since the pandemic, lots of lawyers are really, really busy. And the reality is, it's human nature to resort back to our old ways. I mean, how many times have you seen, or maybe yourself, me, or you, we've been out and we're trying to calculate the tip to give a waitress or waiter, and we do it on a piece of paper instead of using our phone, which of course would be more accurate, and especially after a couple beers. So it's resorting back to the old ways. It's not that we don't understand that the new way of working is better. It's that we have to create the time to learn the technology. And also, we need to market, right? Go back to marketing the value of taking that time. I think a lot of times, I think a lot of why it's some of these technologies aren't being embraced is a combination of old habits die hard, and how do we package it up so that the users understand the value of it? Because again, just because you offer some technology, if people don't understand what it's in it for me, what am I going to get out of it? What are we going to get out of it? Then why would they do it? I am seeing pressure from clients. The way to move lawyers is clients. That's always the way. So if you look at in-house legal departments that are busy and working really hard, but frustrated with answering the same questions over and over and over again, that are really basic questions that the business people ask, and that the business people often ask the wrong people, that frustration and that pressure from business is making lawyers in-house want to figure out a more efficient and effective way to get the answers back to their clients. And the clients are wanting a better, again, to go back to experiences, a better experience with legal, an easier experience. And so that pressure from the business and that frustration, a lot of innovations come from frustrations. The frustrations on the part of the lawyers, I think, is starting to bring it to a head, and we're seeing those changes.
Do the legal professionals of today have what it takes at the moment, or really have those skills and that knowledge to meet the clients in what they are looking for? Or because, I mean, it's not necessarily something we initially learn in law school.
Okay, so they definitely have the knowledge. Lawyers, what I always tell, I tell my kids, I tell law school students, get a law and business degree, because having that expertise as a lawyer and having the brain of a lawyer, we got that. All right. It's the other stuff around it, how to deliver the message. We've all been to a doctor before that delivered some bad news, like maybe you're not going to be able to keep that tooth, or you're going to need braces, etc. And they haven't delivered it in a way that was that nice. So it's not just lawyers, but lots of professional service providers need to learn how to deliver the knowledge. That's where I think we're lacking in those skills. What I would say, though, is we're not lacking in potential. I am a big believer that the right teaming and collaboration starts with you, starts with the individual. It's an individual skill, and it is one. Both collaboration and leadership can be honed, but it takes work. And to your point that you brought up earlier, the problem is we don't actually focus on it in legal education at the beginning. So that's unfortunate.
Talking about legal education, I think this is a perfect moment to move to your own initiative, which is Law Without Walls, or LWOW. Now, for those who don't actually know what Law Without Walls is a virtual experiential learning community that leverages intergenerational, cross-culture, multidisciplinary collaboration to create innovations in the business of law, and most importantly, to change the mindset, skill sets, and behaviors of legal professionals. Now, I think this is a very, very brief introduction to Law Without Walls. So I'd love to hear from you. What exactly does LWOW do, and how did it come to be?
So, Law Without Walls is an executive education program for aspiring lawyers and for practicing lawyers and for professionals that work in the law marketplace that maybe aren't lawyers, and for business professionals and business students. And it's designed to train the 21st century skills that lawyers need to differentiate themselves and to actually be client centric and develop relationships with their clients the way their clients want them to. So it's all those skills we were just talking about. They're the skills of an inclusive leader. In some ways, Law Without Walls is leadership training. The way we do it is team based. We put multidisciplinary, multicultural, intergenerational teams of students from law and business schools from around the world, lawyers from all over the world, business professionals, entrepreneurs, venture capitalists on a team. And we take them on an innovation journey where they have to solve a real business of law challenge that's given to them by one of the sponsoring entities, whether it's Spotify or HSBC or Microsoft or Vincent Masons or White and Case, you name it, a law firm or a law company like United Lex, a real business of law challenge that the team hacks on and refines and writes consumer stories about and really understands the ins and outs, problem trip maps it, you name it, until they finally find a solution that's at the intersection of law, technology, and business, and write a business plan to make sure it's viable. Over the course of that innovation journey, they hone the DNA of an innovator. They learn how to question in a different way, how to experiment in a different way, how to communicate in a different way, how to analyze and extrapolate and solve problems collaboratively and in a different way than they might in their own area of expertise, whether it's law or insurance or marketing or other types of business.
What was initially the reaction that you got when you launched Law Without Walls? Was it a positive reaction from the field, from law schools? How did that work?
It was super positive because I went and asked my friends. So I went and asked Professor Bruce Green at Fordham and David Wilkins at Harvard and my dear friend who just passed, Deborah Rohde at Stanford. And, I went and asked the folks at University College London and IE and the schools that I knew. And I asked them if they would join on this crazy experiment. And they said yes. And because of that group, those first 6 to 8 schools that said yes back when we were babies, it just took on a life of its own. And it is really without walls and without hierarchies. So we have schools of different rank, schools from different countries, schools with different age students, right? We've got schools that are where the students are getting their masters and they've already practiced for 5 years. We've got schools like in the US where all the students have gone to college and they're getting a JD. We've got schools like in Australia where it's part of their college experience to get a law degree. So it's really wonderful. I think that the most interesting thing about Law Without Walls is in the first year, we were about students. And by the third year, we realized we are about so much more than, and I don't mean just students, but what we learned was the practicing attorneys, the current business professionals learned so much from the students, and the students learned so much from them. That intergenerational up and down cross learning was sort of our secret sauce. And so we realized that, yeah, students were getting a lot out of the program, but wow, the people out in the real world were getting even more because they were practicing leadership and mentoring in a different way and learning a new way to approach their business and their business's problems.
You also said that you have a multidisciplinary approach. So it's intergenerational, but also multidisciplinary. How do you get everyone to speak the same language when they join the LWOW programs?
Well, it's interesting that you asked that because one cool thing about our community, and we always have everyone stand up or put their videos on for how many languages they speak. 60% or more of our participants first language is not English. And most of them, of course, that means that 60% or more speak two or more languages, but so many speak three languages. And I know your question wasn't about actual language, but I bring it up because admittedly, I can speak some Spanish, but I'm embarrassed that I don't speak more. In the US, we all speak English and we expect everyone else to. So we speak English in Law Without Walls because it's our common thread. But the language we speak is built by our culture. We are first name basis only. We are no ties allowed. We are non hierarchical in every way possible. And we have rules of engagement that we set at the beginning, which I mentioned earlier. And we have running tenants. Feedback is a gift. Um, it, it is the community's culture and the community's voice and language that is the common thread from a student in China to a law firm partner in Australia to a lawyer in South Africa to a business professional in Canada, a venture capitalist in Tennessee of the United States, right? The common language is LWOW. And it's a culture, and it's one that's, you kind of have to be hard nosed about culture. People like to think it's really soft and, oh, we're all kumbaya. We are. We always say, we're like the Hotel of California. You can check out, but you can never leave. But you have to conform, right? If you're not willing to participate in that way, then Law Without Walls isn't right for you.
Yeah, and I mean, also, it might be kumbaya, or maybe people might say that, but still, it's also confrontational in a way to suddenly be joined by many other people from many different age ranges, many different professional levels and disciplines, also. So I can imagine that's definitely something to get used to in the beginning.
Oh, it is. And we practice and we do teaming exercises every time we team. And for me as a leader of the team, and all the project managers and team leaders of the individual teams know this, and they do the same thing when we have to say, okay, put your thick skin suit on, because we have to critique each other's work. Otherwise, you get groupthink and you get incompetent failure. And I mean, over the last 12 years, I've led 230 plus multidisciplinary teams on a 4-month innovation journey. And it's tough. Some students really don't like it because they don't want to work at 2 a.m. and odd times and meet with their team leaders who are in different countries who are pushing them. They want to just take a course. And if you just want to take a course for 3 credits, then you shouldn't do Law Without Walls, because that's not what this is. This is like working on a project like an entrepreneur would, and the hours can get crazy and they're tough and the feedback is tough and starting over is tough, and almost every team starts over at least once on the journey.
And I'm also interested to know, you've got like a ton of projects or a ton of tracks that you offer at LWOW. I was looking on the website. Can you tell us perhaps a little bit more about each, or not necessarily each of these tracks, but what do you really offer at LWOW? What's the difference between all these different programs?
So, in our original offering back in 2010, 2011 was a blended program, part virtual. We meet in person, we go virtual 4 months, we meet in person again. And that's really my belief where the future lies. And it's so odd that we were using Zoom 4 or 5 years ago. We used Adobe. We used the number of different platforms we've used over the last 12 years is wild. So we started with a blended approach. And in 2013, we did an all virtual approach, which I know the world is so sick of that because we've just done it in the last 2 years. Believe me, the people that did the all virtual with us over the last 7 years were really prepared for this pandemic. So we had an all virtual approach, and that was basically a 4 month journey where the teams never met in person. We did our kickoff online where we used breakout rooms. Yes, we did this back in 2013, right? And everyone, the funny thing for me is the world, my friends, my universe used to say, "What are you doing? What do you mean you're on in breakout rooms? What do you mean you're online all day? Why are you exhausted?" And now I'm like, the world gets what I was doing and why I was so tired. Okay. Anyway, so then and then this year we offered well, the year before the pandemic, we were offering again, blended program where we started virtually and we ended in person. Now, of course, the last year we went to all virtual and we shortened and went to a 4-week sprint, which was super exciting to condense the program to 4 weeks. And then the best thing ever is next year, we're only offering one thing. We are only doing in person, 3 days in Spain, yinging when everyone else is yanging.
And for anyone who's interested, who can join? Is it only students that are enrolled in the universities that are part of L or have partnered with LWOW? Is it really anyone from any university or any law firm or anywhere that can join?
Anyone from anywhere can try and join. We have an application process that is video based, which again, I know TikTok's now doing that as well. We've been doing video applications for years. And so we have a video application for students who, whether you're a part of the universities that are a part of LWOW or not, but also we've had every year a couple students apply from outside of our participating organizations. And then in terms of lawyers and business professionals, we're always looking for volunteers. And of course, sponsors. We will have 16 teams for the in-person sprint, 3-day sprint in March, hosted by IE Law School in Segovia, Spain. And we have about 5 spots left. So if your sponsoring entity is interested in getting some of your internal people to work together differently and transform relationships between your lawyers and your business professionals and other clients, come on board.
That's amazing news, I think, also for anyone who's listening to this episode. Now, you already mentioned just before about the different aspects that LWOW focuses on. I also mentioned it briefly in the introduction. So, new skill sets, change of mindset, and also behaviors. And I remember, or I listened to one of the podcast episodes that you were recently part of, and one of the things that you mentioned was one of the winning teams in, I think it was the last program that you offered on in the past year, which was a project called Shine. I remember you talking about the topic of diversity within this context, and I think that's a topic that is really, really gaining a lot of attention, more and more, especially in the field of technology and law, but generally as well. Is this something that LL also focuses on, this whole topic of diversity and encouraging diversity within teaming and the work generally, the legal work generally?
Absolutely. It was probably the number one reason why I created Law Without Walls. I was shocked by how insular and hierarchical and how many walls there were in law. And I wanted to do something that included law and business. I mean, that was its charge from day one, the power of diversity. You know, in the corporate world, we might take diversity for granted a little bit because there is more diversity just by the nature, I think, than in the law world. But diversity is the key to any type of collaborative creative problem solving. There's studies by MIT, there's studies by Google, there's studies upon studies upon studies that diversity of every kind, expertise, IQ, age, ambition, right? Why do you want those lazy people on your team? They figure out how to get stuff done faster. Anyway, or how to not do stuff that doesn't matter. So we have in the 3 rules of engagement, the open mind, open heart, open door. Open door is that. It's about diversity, opening the door not only to your past and not only to your future, but to people from diverse and backgrounds, culture, and diversity in every way, shape, or form. It's one of the reasons why Law Without Walls is the most diverse community in the law marketplace.
Definitely. And also in terms of technology more generally within LWOW, of course, the Law of Tech podcast is focused on the interaction between law and technology, both the theory of law, but also the practice of law. And I know that LWOW also focuses on tech. What is exactly the role of technology within the programs that you offer? And how do you, like, for example, encourage tech literacy among the participants?
So in terms of tech being part of a solution, tech doesn't need to be the solution. And a lot of our projects have focused around process and people. So some of our greatest solutions are changing the way teams work within corporate legal departments or within law firms. And is technology a part of that? Probably. I mean, who doesn't have their iPhone with them right now? You know, of course it involves some technology, but we don't tell students that they have to create a technology. Now, the team you mentioned earlier that worked on the project Shine, That was a project sponsored by White and Case. And it was what they developed was a work allocation tool to prevent unconscious bias, to match the skills, experience, and interests of associates to the needs and desires of the partners, but also connected to what the clients said in their diversity protocols. So it was a loop that did all three things, looking at it from the associates' perspectives, the partner's perspective, and the clients. And of course, technology is a big piece of that because technology was the way to get rid of the cognitive bias and also part of how the tool works. In terms of tech enablement, everybody that works in a Law Without Walls project learns tons of new technologies. And we actually have the teams in their first meeting where they set their packs, right? We make them make packs: purpose, accountability, creative cadence, timing. Creative cadence is all about technology. What technologies will your team use and how? What's your expected response time? Is it appropriate to text on WhatsApp? Will you use email? Will you use Slack? Will you use Teams? If you use Teams, will you keep your documents in Teams or will you use Google Drive? How will you organize? How will you work collaboratively on documents so you don't have version wars? We actually get into that nitty gritty and have people discuss it. And we also have webinars where we talk about all the changes in the legal profession and technology like AI and how it can be used. And we have tons of past webinars that we assign where experts are discussing that and reading about that. So that is also part of the substantive learning for all the teams and definitely for especially the students. So that's a big piece of it as well. But we don't teach it in the sense of we don't teach people how to code. But there is probably, if you go back to the list of webinars that are accessible to students and assigned to the teams, it is very much about what technology and tools are out there and how they're being used and how they are impacting the law marketplace. And then, of course, the teams themselves, their projects, and require them to go learn it. I mean, HSBC had one on blockchain and automated contracts. All of those members learned more about blockchain and automated contracts than they wanted to, and about syndicated loans. So every team becomes experts in the technologies that are involved as part of their challenge.
Looking at the longer term goals that you have with LWOW, what are some of the things that you're planning in the future? Have you got new law schools that you're planning on partnering up with, or any new programs that you're thinking of?
Well, we're always looking for more universities, and as mentioned earlier, our number one goal for 2022 is to get back in person again. And I'm not saying that blended isn't where it's at. It is. I think the blended programs, and blended work where you're a mix of in-person and virtual is what our future will be. And those people that learn how to leverage that and really leverage the time when you're in person and team appropriately when you're virtual, they will be super successful. That said, for 2022, we're focused on in-person community gathering in Spain. Please join us.
Definitely. And to wrap up this episode also, for anyone who would like to join, for example, Law Without Walls, or generally get in touch with you, what's the best way to do so?
You can shoot me an email at md@law.miami.edu, or you can reach out to us through our website, lawwithoutwalls.org.
We'll definitely go and do that if you're interested in any of the programs that Law Without Walls offers. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me. It was really a pleasure to have you here and to talk about this topic a little bit more. So thank you.
Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to talk about all the things I'm so passionate about. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for tuning in to the Law of Tech podcast. If you want to make sure you keep up to date with the show and never miss out on an episode, be sure to subscribe on your podcast platform of choice and follow the Law of Tech on social media. If you enjoyed the show, please give it a rating or review as it helps others discover the show. And don't forget to share it with your network. For now, have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode of the Law of Tech podcast.